Gute Woche. This afternoon, the Rebbe Zolgazunzing began the Farbrengen regarding Shabbos HaGodl. That today, this Shabbos is called Shabbos HaGodl. The reason for it, we find many reasons in Svarim why this Shabbos has this title. However, the Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch only brings several of the reasons, because the Alter Rebbe only brings these reasons that are related to halacha. The Alter Rebbe brings two reasons. First of all, that on this day, when the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, Lamake Mitzrayim b'fchoreim took place, which means that the Mitzrayim got aware that the Rebbe is going to bring the plague of Makas Pchoros. And they naturally did not want this to happen. So a war broke out between the Mitzrayim and the Pchorim of the Mitzrayim, which this in itself is a nes. So the Lamake Mitzrayim b'fchoreim, when did this take place? This took place several days before the Yidden left Mitzrayim, and this took place approximately on the day, this took place several days before the Yidden left Mitzrayim, and that is why we celebrate Shabbos HaGodl today. Another reason is because the Rebbe told the Yidden that they should take the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach was something which the Mitzrayim worshipped to, so the Yidden did not take this into consideration and took the Korban Pesach publicly and attached it to their beds, and this was done on the 10th day of Nisan. And in the year that the Yidden left Mitzrayim, the 10th day of Nisan came out to be on a Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe also explains in Shulchan Aruch the reason why this date was not set to be celebrated year after year on the 10th day of Nisan. The Rebbe did not get into that. However, what the Rebbe did raise the question, what we derive from all of this is that these reasons are side inyanim which took place around this date. Why is it that the Shabbos has the title Shabbos HaGodel? It's a great Shabbos. What is so great in the Shabbos that we give this Shabbos the title Shabbos HaGodel? Apparently these inyanim have nothing to do with the Shabbos. These are side inyanim which we now have set aside that we celebrate this on this Shabbos. However, regarding the Shabbos itself, there's no special inyan which took place. So again, the question comes back, why do we refer to this day as Shabbos HaGodel? And the Rebbe continued that being that the Shabbos is called Shabbos HaGodel, we must find an explanation how this Shabbos is Godel. How can we understand this better? We have a halacha in the halachas of Sukkah. Though now we are before Pesach, and Pesach is the first of the Yomim Tovim, Sukkot is the last of the Yomim Tovim. However, it is brought in Chassidus that Sukkot has also the title of Chag HaOsif. It is the Yontif when we gather in, besides the simple meaning that it's the Yontif when we gather everything which has grown in the fields is being brought into the homes. It has another interpretation. We gather and we accumulate all of the spiritual revelations which have transpired throughout the entire year. So Mamela, there is a shayches between Sukkot and Pesach. In the halachas of Sukkot, we find the halacha: a Sukkah has to be a temporary residence, and the Sukkah has to be covered. The schach on the Sukkah also has to be from such type of materials which give it the feeling that it's a temporary residence. Therefore, if one would have a board which is wider than 4 tvachim, we are not allowed to use this board as schach, because a board wider than 10 tvachim already seems like a permanent type of a setup rather than a temporary setup. Question arises, what would happen if the board is wide 4 tvachim on one side and is not wide 4 tvachim on the other side? Can we cover the sukkah with the side of the board which is not wide 4 tvach, and the halacha is that we cannot. And the Gemara uses the expression Nase kishpudin shel barzel, that this board became just like a piece of iron, just like a piece of metal. We can't take and cover the sukkah with that. The same with this board. What is the explanation? Being that one side of the board has more than 4 tvachim, it has already affected the entire board. And the entire board became a mitzias, became such type of a substance which cannot be used for a sukkah. The same thing here regarding Shabbos HaGodel. Being that this Shabbos got the title of Shabbos HaGodel, so therefore this is a great and outstanding Shabbos. And it is reflected in all of the inyanim of the Shabbos. And as the Rebbe kept on stressing, being that this Shabbos is Godel, even in Yonim which we do on other Shabbosim, regular routine in Yonim which are done on a regular Shabbos. These in Yonim, when they are done on Shabbos HaGodel, it is done in a format of godless, in a format of greatness. This is regarding the meals which are eaten on Shabbos, and the Inyan of Einik Shabbos, and being Mavid Seder on Shabbos, which all of these are in Yonim which we do on every Shabbos. Nonetheless, when these inyanim are done on Shabbos HaGodel, it is part of Shabbos HaGodel, and therefore it is done in a format of godless. Because it unites all of the inyanim of the Shabbos, that they all come into a category of Godel, of great and outstanding. And here the Rebbe brought another example. The Gemara tells us regarding a Nasi. The Gemara says that who is suitable to be chosen as a Nasi by Yidden? One that Ein Alav Ella Hashem Elikov. One that there is nobody else above him but the Rabbeinu Shalom. What does this mean? That who is worthy of being a Nasi? Somebody who is solely dedicated to the Rabbeinu Shalom. That as far as he's concerned, there is no other power above him. Meaning there is nothing else in existence, only the Rabbeinu Shalom. And here we come to an interesting halacha. We know that when we daven Shmoneh Esrei, when we begin the bracha, we have to bow down. Then, after we have said Baruch Atah, it comes to Hashem, we have to straighten ourselves out. Regarding a Nasi and a Melech, when they would daven Shmoneh Esrei, when they bowed, they would remain in a position, in that position, bowing to the Rebishter for the entire Shmoneh Esrei. Why? Because here we see what the personality of a Nasi is. The personality of a Nasi is such that he's not his own personality in no way whatsoever. His personality is such that he's no mitzias for himself, as the expression would be in Chassidish terminology. He's totally dedicated to the Rabbeinu Shalom. That is why when it comes to reflect this thought in Gashmias, he is a koireya, meaning he bows down. What is the idea of bowing? The idea of bowing is it reflects an expression of dedication to the Rabbeinu Shalom. When the Nasi davens, he remains that way the entire Shmoneh Esrei. Why? Because he is in such a format, is his dedication to the Rebishter, that no way is he anything for himself. Who is worthy of being a Nasi? One who is Ein Alav Ella Hashem Elikov. There's nobody other than the Rabbeinu Shalom Anhu. And that is why this thought is so, it goes to such an extent that it's reflected in halacha that even when he davens in such a way that he's a koireya, meaning he bows down, and he's not zoykef, he does not get up until he finishes the entire Shmoneh Esrei. Once he finishes the entire Shmoneh Esrei, then he could get up. But when he davens to the Rebishter, he's in such a bittul, in such a dedication to the Rabbeinu Shalom, that in no way is he a metzias for himself in any way whatsoever. And here the Rebbe explained a step further regarding the inyan of Shabbos HaGodel. It's brought in Sfarim another reason why Shabbos HaGodel, the Shabbos before Pesach, is called Shabbos HaGodel. Being that we find in the Torah says, Usfartem lachem mimachas HaShabbos, regarding Sfiras Omer, that when should you begin counting? From the second day of Pesach. So what do we see there? We see there that the Torah refers to Pesach with the title of Shabbos. So we say that even Pesach has the title of Shabbos. This Shabbos, which is before Pesach, is a Shabbos HaGodel, meaning it is yet greater than Pesach. How is this Shabbos greater than Pesach? So Rebbe explained. When we're talking Pesach, Pesach is Man Cheroseinu. We stress we celebrate our freedom. What does it mean we celebrate our freedom? That means there is room for the contrary of freedom. And here there is an inyan which is the opposite of freedom, which is the bondage to Mitzrayim. Comes Pesach, we celebrate the fact that the Rebbe has released us from Mitzrayim. The inyan of Shabbos is a yet higher madrega than that. On Shabbos we say Mizmashil Yom HaShabbos. When do we recite this? Right at the beginning of the Shabbos, even before we ate our meal, even before we daven Ma'ariv. Right before we enter Ma'ariv, we say Mizmashil Yom HaShabbos. What is the meaning of this kapitel Mizmashil Yom HaShabbos? So the Gemara says, Mizmashil Yom HaShabbos Liyoim Shekuloi Shabbos U'Menucha L'Chayei Elomim. This is an indication of the day which will be entirely Shabbos. When is that? The days when Mashiach will come. So what is the inyan of Shabbos now? The inyan of Shabbos now is a taste of the Yom Shekuloi Shabbos U'Menucha L'Chayei Elomim. The period when Mashiach will come will also be referred to as Shabbos. So now on Shabbos we are tasting that Yom Shekuloi Shabbos. The Mele the Rebbe is saying Shabbos is already a taste of Geula. So Shabbos, what we have Shabbos now, we're already tasting what the world will be like when Mashiach will come. So that is why Shabbos now is even higher. That's why when we say Shabbos HaGodel, this is a special Shabbos, it is even Godel as opposed to Pesach, which Pesach is Man Cheroseinu. Here we are at a yet higher Madrege. Here we are on a Madrege of tasting what the world would be like when Mashiach would come. Here the Rebbe also mentioned the famous, in which the Rebbe mentions many times, that Golas and Geula are composed from the same letters. However, what is the difference? Geula has an Aleph. Golas doesn't. Who does the Aleph refer to? To the Rebbeinu Shalom. What does that mean? That when a Yid associates himself with the Aleph, then it becomes no longer Golas, and it becomes Gil. Then the Rebbe continued that we are now in the days that we recite the Nasi. Beginning from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until 12 days in the month of Nisan, we say daily the Nasi. And it's already explained in more detail in the Farbrengen of last Shabbos. And after we say the Nasi, we say the Hirot. The reading of the Torah, what the Torah tells us about the Nesiyim, we really read that a few times a year. In the Torah, with a bracha before and after. We read it on Shabbos Parshas Nasi, and we also read it on Hanukkah. However, then there is no saying of Yehi Ratzon. Now, when we recite it during the month of Nisan, every day we say Yehi Ratzon. Let us look into the Yehi Ratzon and see what is the contents of the Yehi Ratzon. We say outstanding words. That through reciting this Nasi on a daily basis, this should affect me, Ulazari, Ulazerazari, it should affect myself, it should affect my children, and my children's children. May ata fi ad oilam, from now until ever. In other words, it's something eternal. And we don't stop there. We continue with an amen. It shows us how outstanding, what kind of tremendous inyanim are accomplished by reciting the Nasi. How much more so is it on this Shabbos, that this Shabbos we conclude reciting the Nasi. So there are some that will say that when do we really conclude saying the Nasi? On the 13th day of Nisan. But on the 13th day of Nisan we also say an inyan. Vahi bayom kalis Moshe. However, after that we don't say Yehi Ratzon. So when do we finish saying the Nesiyim as far as saying Yehi Ratzon? That's on today, on this day of 12 days in the month of Nisan. This day, 12 days in the month of Nisan, besides that it is Shabbos, and this year, it is the second Shabbos of saying Nesiyim. Not every year do we have 2 Shabbosim when we say a Nasi. Depends how the calendar comes out. But this year we have it in a way that this is already the second Shabbos of reciting a Nasi. Being more specific, what is today's Nasi? Today is the Nasi of the tribe of Naphtali. What is the inyan of Shevet Naphtali? So the Torah tells us regarding Naphtali, Naphtali ayolo shlucha. Naphtali is compared to a ram. What is not so outstanding regarding the ram? The fact that he accomplishes a mission fast. And in Torah it's called the inyan of zrizus. So what do we derive from the inyan of today's Nasi? The fact that when a Yid is involved in any inyan of Torah mitzvahs, it has to be accomplished in a way of the method of zrizas. It has to be done fast right away. Not to postpone, but to do it right away. And this, the Rebbe says, corresponds to the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim. What do we find by Yetzias Mitzrayim? The Torah tells us, B'chipozoin, that the Rebbe took us out of Mitzrayim. In what way? In a way of chipozoin, which is in the way of speed, the Rebbe took us out of Mitzrayim. So again, it's the same idea of today's Nasi, that how does a mitzvah have to be fulfilled in a way of zerizus. And here the Rebbe mentioned the famous story of the Alter Rebbe and Reb Shlomo Karlin. That was in the days of Napoleon. We know that the Alter Rebbe did not want that Napoleon should succeed. Because the Alter Rebbe claimed that it would be better for Yidden had he not succeed and take over Russia. However, Reb Shlomo Karlin felt that it would be better for Yidden that if Napoleon would succeed. These two tzaddikim saw Lamaila that whoever will blow the shofar earlier and that Rosh Hashanah, it will be accomplished the way his desire. So Reb Shlomo Karlin, as soon as it became day of Rosh Hashanah, he gathered a minyan and began davening so that he should be able to come to Tkiyah Shofar right away. However, the Alter Rebbe also gathered a minyan as soon as the day started. What did he do? He went ahead and he blew the shofar right away. In fact, the way the story goes, Reb Shlomo Karlin, who was hundreds of kilometers away from the Alter Rebbe, immediately realized what the Alter Rebbe did, and he expressed himself, the Litvak. This is how they used to refer to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe came from Lita. That the Litvak hat uns schön ausgehabt. He's already ahead of us. So what does this incident reflect? This reflects the concept of zrizas. How an inyan has to be done immediately, right away. This is the same idea that we find in the Torah of Vayashkem Avram Baboiker. Avram rose in the morning and he did it and he took care of it right away. He rushed to take care of it. Now there's the one that could say, he's already doing Inyanim fast. What do we want from him? He's accomplishing Inyanim in a fast way. And he knows that today is Parshas Tzav. And we know what Rashi tells us, that Ein Tzav Elo Loshen Zirus. What is the Inyan of Tzav? It's to rush us up that we should do things right away. So he's already doing this. What do we want from such a person? So says, let us see what Rashi tells us further. Ein Mizarzin whom do we rush that he should do things fast? The one who is already in a position of doing things fast. So him we are giving an extra reminder that he should be a zaras. So Mamela, this is a message to everyone, that everyone has to be in a position of doing things fast and make sure that things are taken care of in the right way and not to postpone it, and do it in a format of zerizus. Not to delay it, but do it right away. Especially the Rebbe stressed. We know the famous writing from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Rebbe writes, which the Rebbe has been quoting very often lately, Imdu hochin kulchem, that we should all stay ready to accept the brachas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And primarily the main bracha of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe will take us out of Golas. And all that we are lacking is that we have to shine our buttons, zuputzen the kneplach. So the Rebbe says the buttons are there already. Everything is ready. What do we have to do? We just have to do a little bit of a final touch, and then the Rebbe will take us out of Golas. Talking about, when the Rebbe mentioned how the Alter Rebbe was against the fact that Napoleon should take over Russia, because the Alter Rebbe felt it would be worse for Yidden as far as they're serving the Rebishter. Because the Alter Rebbe at that time felt, even though it would be better for Yidden in Gashmias, still it would take him away from the dedication to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Today the Rebbe says, now that we have gone through so many inyonim since the days of the Alter Rebbe, now the Rebishter has to give it to Yidden in a way that Yidden should have a harchava in Gashmias, and with the Hachava in Gashmias, they will still be dedicated to the Rebishter and serve him properly. Then it was different times. And today it is also different times. Today it's a time when the Rebishter should and could give Yidden a Hachava, and together with it, it will not take away from the dedication from Yidden to serve the Rebishter. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe continued that there is a pasuk that will come the time of Mashiach. It would be Yizbaru v'yislabnu hadvorim. In other words, everything will have to be purified and everything will have to stand out clear and precise and clear. Everything will have to be perfectly understood and open. Everything will be revealed. In continuation to that, the Rebbe again spoke about the importance that every person create his area, his personal area, that it should be suitable to be a mishkan lo yisbarach, it should be ready for the dwelling of the Shechina. This is benegei adults, and specifically regarding children. And here the Rebbe added that when parents give something to children, whatever is given to children, it is the nature of parents that it is given away to the child, that it belongs to the child. In halacha, there's a concept that a child could be koine. In other words, a child can acquire, it belongs to him. However, in halacha, a child cannot give away, a child cannot be makne. Therefore, when the child is given all of these inyanim which he's given by his parents, this becomes his. So who is the one that can purify all of these inyanim? That all of these inyanim should become a mikdash ma'at, that it should become roi for the Shechina to dwell there, it is only the child. Because it is his and nobody else's. Once it's the child cannot give it to anyone. So now it is the obligation of the child to see to it that he acts in such a way that Kedusha and Getlachkeit and godliness comes into his room and to his bed and to his table and to everything which belongs to him, and that all of this becomes a Mishkan to the Rebishter. Because the whole idea of a Mishkan is a place where the Shechina dwells and where the Rebishter rests. And here the Rebbe tells us that everything which belongs to a child, to everyone, and particularly to children, everyone is capable of making a Mikdash Ma'at from their belongings. However, we all know that we have the Chazarah, and the Chazarah interferes to fulfill this wish of the Rebishter. So what is the Eitzah to this? The advice to this is, Asay l'cho Rav. We should have a Rav, whom we should be able to discuss our inyonim with, and the Rav naturally has one interest, one and only interest. His interest is to help us, that we should be able to serve the Rebishter properly. Memela, then we will be able to succeed to fulfill this mission. Together with all of this, we also have to remember that what the Gemara tells us, that a Yid has 3 simonim, 3 ways how a Yid is identified. What are they? Baishonim, Rachmonim, and Goyim Lechasod. First and foremost, the Yid has to know that he has to have this midah of Baishonis, the midah of being ashamed. Secondly, he has to have the midah of Rachmim, of having pity. And also he has to have the midah of being a Goyim Chesed. And by these 3 inyanim, this is how a Yid can be identified. The Rebbe says it applies to everyone, and here the Rebbe spoke this inyan regarding to the Rav. The Rav has to have within himself all of these inyanim. And how did the Rebbe explain it? First of all, when the Rav is asked something which he does not know, he shouldn't be ashamed, and he should admit that this Indian he doesn't know, and he will look for an interpretation, but meanwhile he doesn't know. And together with this is part the midah of Rachmanis, because if the Rav will say things which he does not know, then this is contrary to Rachmanis. When he has pity on somebody else, how can he tell him something where he's not giving him the proper guidance? But at the same time, the Rav should not say, if so, I don't know, let me just walk aside and let me leave the Indian go. Being that he was chosen as a Rav, it is his obligation to go ahead and harave and work hard and look for the answers and get back to his Talmidim and be able to help. We also find the same Indian in the Torah. Find the Indian in the Torah by Aaron. When Moshe told him, Aaron was shy, he had a midah of baishonus, and was not willing to go forward and do the Avodah in the Mishkan. So what did Moshe tell him? Don't be ashamed. Lekach nifcharta. This is what you were chosen for. Aaron was well aware that he was chosen for that. What did Moshe tell him something new? The interpretation here is, Aaron acted up to his midah of baishonus. And that is why he was ashamed to go close and do the Avodah, which was the proper thing for Aaron to do at the time. Because a Yid by nature has to have this midah of being a Baish. However, Moshe told him, no, Moshe, this is not the time to use this midah. Lekach nefcharta, this is what you were chosen for, and therefore go ahead and do the Avodah. Here the Rebbe spoke Bechlal that this is the whole union of Chassidus. It's a famous expression that what does Chassidus accomplish in a person? L'shanois teva midoisav, or there's another expression, l'shanois midoisav hativiyim, which means that the whole idea of Chassidus is a person has his midas, his natural midas, which are part of him. And there may be nothing wrong with them. However, what does Chassidus teach us? Chassidus teaches that he has to work over these midas. This is, the Rebbe teaches, the Torah tells us, Lech lecha me'artzecha me'meladetecha me'beis avicha. Famous pasuk which was said to Avram Avinu, leave your country, leave your origin, leave your father's home. What does this mean? It also means the same idea. Lech lecha me'artzecha. So Chassidus teaches from your artziyos, from the midas which you got used to, and these midas became part of you, you have to go step out of them. In other words, the same idea, lishanis teva midoisav, a person has to be able to change his nature. This is what we are here talking about also. This idea of person changing his midas, and this is what Chassidus demands from him. Even though his midas were good midas, however, he has to purify them and change his midas. In the new capital of the Rebbe, there's the pasuk, Kol goyim asher asisa yovayu lishtachavu lefanecha. That all the goyim which you have created will come and bow for you. And this pasuk is referring to the days of Mashiach. This is what this pasuk is referring to. And the stress here is, Kol goyim, all the nations. So here the Rebbe tied this in to the Indian of Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Of all the mitzvahs, the 7 mitzvahs which the Goyim are obligated to fulfill. Rebbe mentioned the Rambam. The Rambam tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu related to Yidden in the name of the Rebishter, lokuf, to force, kol bo yolam, all the people that are created on the world, to force them that they should fulfill their mitzvahs. Which means that we Yidden have an obligation to see, to utilize our influence on Goyim, that Goyim should fulfill their mitzvahs. Rebbe says, this wasn't the practice generations ago. The reasons are very simple. Because generations ago, it was involved with fear. Not only with fear, with a danger that Yidden should get involved to tell Goyim what to do. However, nowadays, it's something which the Goyim welcome. And especially, the Rebbe says, what has happened recently, that the president of this country came out with a proclamation that Goyim should fulfill the 7 mitzvahs, and not only to the Goyim of this country, but he called upon leaders from other countries that they should follow him. In fact, the Rebbe added, really, we Yidden were supposed to do that. But being that we Yidden did not do it, so the opportunity was given to the president that he should come out with this proclamation and demand that Goyim should fulfill the 7 mitzvahs, and also requested from other countries and leaders from other countries that they should follow in his footsteps, that they too should demand from their people to fulfill the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, which every guy is obligated to fulfill. Interesting, this sikha regarding the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, and the sikha which we just related before, regarding the obligation of every person, and particularly children, to make their areas and belongings suitable that the Shechina should dwell there, were 2 separate sikhas. And at the end of this sikha, the Rebbe says the reason why he said it in 2 separate sikhas is because the first he spoke about children. Children have no shayches to this inyan of Zayim Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. Children have to play not with Goyish children, but children have to play with Yiddish kinder. Once they grow up, then they also come under this obligation which we just discussed of preparing the world, that the world should be ready to the Kol Goyim Asher Asisa Yavayu L'Yishtachav L'Fanecha. And how do we accomplish this? By reaching out to all the Goyim and influencing them that they should fulfill the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach. As it's customary in the Farbrengen that the Rebbe explains an Indian in the daily Shir of the Rambam, and also a Rashi in the week Sedra. Regarding the Shir of the Rambam, Rebbe also mentioned that Monday, Erev Pesach, is the Rambam's birthday. And regarding the Rambam, it's interesting, regarding many Gdolei Yisrael, we don't know when they were born. Even though definitely it was celebrated, because of the fact that every one of them, their bris was celebrated, but nonetheless it is not known to us when they were born. However, regarding the Rambam, we know his birthday. Not only do we know his birthday, but we also know the hour he was born. In the Shir Rambam for 3 prakim a day, we're in the middle of the Rambam of the halachas of Kiddush HaChodesh. And here the Rambam raised the question, here the Rebbe raised the question, that the Rambam tells us that all the inyanim regarding setting up the calendar had to be done in Eretz Yisrael only. And the Rambam bases this on a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Ki mitzion teitzei seira, v'dvar Hashem mirushaloi." Even calculating all the cheshbonos regarding setting every new month, how a new month was arranged by seeing the new moon, where was all this been able to happen? This could have happened only in Yerushalayim. The Rebbe raises a question, why? The Rambam himself uses the expression, accept the truth from whoever it was said. So if the calculation for the new month is true and it's accurate, what does it bother us whether it is in Eretz Yisrael or it is not in Eretz Yisrael? As long as it is accurate, we should accept it. And basically what the Rebbe answered was that it seems from the Rambam that doing the calculations is also part of the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the new month. This mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh could only be done in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, all the details involved around this mitzvah were also only able to happen where in Eretz Yisrael and not elsewhere. As the Rambam himself tells us, they are based on the pasuk, Ki mitzion teitzei seira udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. Rebbe also explained pasuk in Rashi, the end of the Sedra, where the Torah there tells us regarding the attitude of Moshe Rabbeinu during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. And there the pasuk says that what Moshe wore, Rashi explains, what type of garment did Moshe wear? Here's the pasuk. There's in Kapitel Ches, pasuk Chof Ches, 2 psukim before Shvi. Vayakter HaMizbecha. So Rashi tells us, Moshe Shimesh Kol Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim Bechaluk Lovan. That during the entire Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, Moshe was wearing Bechaluk Lovan, a white robe or a white shirt. So the Rebbe has several questions in this Rashi. First of all, why does Rashi explain this here? Why not? This should have been mentioned either at the beginning of the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, where the Torah begins telling us how Moshe got involved in the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, or it could have came at the end of conclusion about the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. So the Rebbe explained that there are many Mefoshim here that claim that during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, or prior to that, Moshe had the status of a Kohen Gadol. Why? Being that Moshe was able to appoint Aaron as a Kohen Gadol, so if one appoints somebody else, he himself has to be at least at the same level, if not higher. But the Rebbe says this is not an acceptable Perush, because Moshe did not do anything of his own. He did it based on what the Rebbe told him. And based on what the Rebbe told him, he told him to appoint Aaron as a Kohen Gadol. So this does not mean in any way that Moshe himself had to have the status of a Kohen Gadol. However, the Torah here tells us that Moshe did do inyanim, and we also see further the next Rashi that the shoik, which is a part of the behemah by Yishlamim, was also brought as a kohen. Now this is something strange. We know that a kohen gets the chazah and a shoik, which are two parts of the behemah, of the animal, which is brought as a kohen. Here we see something strange. We see something strange that the shoik went on the mizbeach. In other words, it was not given to the kohen. So the kohen was left only with one part of the matnos kohuna, of the gifts of the kohen, which he normally gets. So we see that there were special halachas which were going on here, which are not the ordinary halachas when karbanos are brought in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan. So now that we see that Moshe was involved in this, as the pasuk says, "Vayakta mizbecha ala oila miluyim hem l'reich nechoyach yishul Hashem," who was the one that did it? Moshe. So Moshe was the one that did it. So Rashi is trying to explain us, what did Moshe do? Rashi says he wore a chaluk lovan. So Rashi says he did not wear all the other begadim which a Kohen Gadol wore, just the chaluk. Why? A chaluk is the most simple one of them. What is the simplest of all the begadim is the chaluk. And Rashi at the same time adds on also what color it was, white. It's explained at length in Chassidus that lovan is considered the most simple color. All are explained in Chassidus that lovan is like an original color, white. Other colors are like added on. What is the original color of anything? It's white. Same here when we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. What type of a robe did he wear? In other words, it was done in the simplest way possible. Chassidus stresses the concept of simplicity is a very high level. In other words, it wasn't in a way where he felt himself and he expressed himself. It was done in a level of total dedication. In other words, everything in the supreme, simple manner, showing that there was no decorations around it. In other words, it was done by Moshe Rabbeinu in a fullest dedication way, a fullest level of dedication to do whatever he had to do during these days of Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen as he usually does, reminding everybody to make a bracha achayna, and he added on that let this also be a bracha achayna on the entire Galus. A good tavach and a kosher and freilich and Pesach.